Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel and finding your path to your best emotional and physical health. Don't forget to click subscribe so you can get notified when new videos come out every week, and also share this information with as many people as possible. We want this information to get out in the world so that we can help people have their best lives possible and dealing with their emotional and physical traumas. So also, please don't forget to download my 5 free videos, which will help you lay the foundation to your best emotional and physical health. So with that, let's get into today's topic. I want to kind of do a continuation of some of the things that go on with complex PTSD. And we had been talking about the outer critic and how people with trauma kind of will use methods and intimacy destroying methods to kind of keep people at bay when they are kind of worried about being connected to others and kind of trying to break that connection or prevent a connection from forming. So I want to talk about the 10 ways that the outer critic is often expressed, so you can recognize those when they're kind of activated. And if you are on the receiving end of one of these, it can help you understand, okay, this is how this person deals with their trauma, and you recognize that they are kind of limiting their intimacy with you because they are keeping you at bay for whatever reason. And then you have a decision, is this person something you want to kind of hold space for while they maybe try to heal those things, and you have to decide, are they continually breaking the intimacy and continually to keep you at bay, or how can you be better formed to have a relationship with them, and what you can tolerate. And I'm not talking just about a romantic relationship, but even a friendship as well. And just to kind of recognize that it's not about you on the receiving end. A lot of times it's about them and their trauma. So let's get into those 10 things that we tend to see in the outer critic. So the very first one, number one, is kind of this passive aggressive distancing from others with kind of withdrawal and kind of distancing. So when it's a fine line between withdraw so that you can process an emotion and withdraw because you're kind of being passive aggressive and you're just distancing. And sometimes the person even doing it isn't quite sure why they're doing it. So that one's kind of a harder one to judge and determine really kind of what's going on, because you can say, I need a moment to process this emotion, and maybe that's the next level we're hoping these people can get to, is that they're like, okay, I need a minute, I need to process this, give me a little bit, and then we'll get back and talk about it. It's the total withdrawal and then not communicating or not knowing the person's coming back that's the issue. And if you've been on the receiving end of this, like I have, it's not much fun because you don't know what's going on, and it makes you feel very lost, in a relationship, and not figure out, what's going on with this person. Are they coming back? Are they not? What do I do next? That kind of thing. Number two, backhanded compliments. We've all kind of struggled with these. Sometimes people will say these things to us, and we're like, I don't know about what this person is trying to really mean, and it really breaks trust. So that's number two. Number three is hurtful teasing. So sometimes when we see things that say, where they're like teasing about things, especially if it's things that you've been vulnerable about and said that, that you're uncomfortable with this, and it's not, I'm trying to think of a good example here, but something that somebody struggles with, and especially if you're in a romantic relationship, and then they kind of poke fun at that, even if you already poke fun at that, and then just say, oh, I was just joking, especially once they realize it's been hurtful, then that can be something that is definitely an outer critic move where they're trying to provide that distance. And then you have to address what's going on in the relationship from that aspect. Number four is the withholding of positive feedback and appreciation. This one you don't see as much, but sometimes you get people that just don't ever say they appreciate, who you are in the relationship, or who, what you bring to the table. And that can be a challenge. And those relationships, if that's kind of the primary, typically don't go very far anyway, because most people then won't get their needs met and they're just gone. But that one can definitely be a challenge as well. Number five, chronic lateness and lack of follow through. This can be from a number of things. Sometimes people with ADHD are like this, but again, ADHD also can come from childhood trauma and stuff as well. and that kind of develops in that kind of hypervigilance and don't know what they're doing with their lives from a very young age. And so when they're chronically late, they're sending that message that your time and you're not important, and whether or not they mean to or not. And again, it's a distancing measure because they're trying to keep people at arm's length, because why get close to them, because they might hurt you, right? So number 6 is expressing all criticisms in an effort to be honest, right? So if they're saying, well, I'm just being honest, right? So honesty is important in a relationship, but this is also one that's fine line. If you're constantly telling someone or criticizing some of the things that they do and who they are, and you're just trying to be honest, that can be very frustrating for the other person, because sometimes we don't need to tell people exactly what we think about them. They don't always need the feedback. It's just not always the right way and right time to do things. So we have to kind of remember, you don't always need to give the feedback or tell everybody what you're thinking in the name of honesty. Even though authenticity and honesty is really important in most relationships, it's not necessarily, you don't need to do it all the time. Number 7 is an interesting one, obsessing over the news. So I know several people that kind of want to watch the news and see what's going on in the world, and especially right now in the middle of a pandemic where things are very negative, and they get kind of caught up in that kind of stuff. That can also be a distancing measure, believe it or not, because it leads to this kind of really hypervigilance and this fear of the world in general. And then that could bleed over into fear of the people around them and fear of their close relationships, because the world is just a dangerous place and there's nothing you can do about it. And they get that hypervigilance and that paranoia. So believe it or not, this kind of obsession with the news is not a healthy thing. I personally don't like to watch the news. I read very, very little news because I don't trust what's always being put out there, and the news is presented in ways to manipulate emotions anyway. So when you get sucked into that, it's very, very unhealthy. Number 8, the outer critic can also express themselves in a way to control others. So when you get the controlling ones, like in the fight trauma style, where they're trying to control other people because it's a way to make them feel safer. So if you feel like you're on the receiving end of that, you might have to ask yourself, what's going on with this person, and are they trying to control because they don't feel safe? And then you're faced with the decision: do you stay while they heal that, if that's a possibility, or if they're going to work on that? Because sometimes if they're not working on it and don't want to move forward, there's not a whole lot you can do, unfortunately. They're choosing to not change who they are and grow and heal those parts, because sometimes it's too scary. And I've seen that too. You know, you see someone where you know that they could build better relationships and they have that capacity, but they don't have the capability because they don't have the willingness to face the stuff that's scary. And because it's definitely not easy and not always comfortable. So some people are ready to grow and some aren't. So you kind of have to be aware of that. Number 9 is catastrophizing out loud. That is really kind of an interesting one as well, because if you, and it's going on a lot now, a lot, because of what's going on in the world today. But they don't understand sometimes that if you're talking about all these things that are happening in the world and all these things that you're afraid of, it can be very triggering to others. And so this is some kind of a more of a subconscious one. People don't always intend to do that, but again, it can be a very distancing strategy, and then people don't feel comfortable being with that person because it's too triggering and too anxiety provoking. And it's sometimes, if you're on the receiving end of that, you have to say, and I've had to say this, not of course in therapy, because that's kind of my job, but even in other relationships, it's like I can't hear any more of this right now. It's too much. It's too overwhelming for me. And it's about expressing those kinds of emotions so that the other person understands where you're coming from and how you feel. And that's a way to increase intimacy, by expressing those emotions. Number 10 is putting a relationship on trial. And what I mean by that is, if you're, kind of becoming the person is becoming the judge and jury, and kind of nitpicking and looking at everything and discussing how everything is right or wrong, and then deciding whether or not this relationship is good and not, and even, I mean, you have to kind of evaluate a relationship, but if you are constantly doing that in multiple relationships, and we can get into that in more detail, but if you're doing it and have a tendency to laundry list the things that are wrong without addressing the things or looking at the things that are good, then that's a relationship on trial, and that's not healthy. So that's a lot to take in about what the outer critic looks like, and you might recognize some of these things in yourself and also in others, but there are ways to kind of deal with them and shrink them, and also recognize them when you do them, and apologize and rebuild the intimacy if you need to after something like that has happened. So with that, I will give you good day, and hopefully you'll connect with me on the website if you need more coaching around some of these issues. And everyone, have a good rest of your week, and let me know how I can help you. Thanks, and have a great day.